This is an update on Vision by me, Maxwell Henderson. I'm our software team captain, and
Jim Ostrowski, mentor for 971.
So we're going to be going over kind of why we're actually doing field calibration, the process to do it, a lot of different things you do to do that, and then the algorithm we use to actually map our field and do calibration, and then like how we sample our results. We need Vision to do localization. Localization just tells us where we are on the field at any given time. And if we know where we are on the field, we can then know what orientation we have to be and what distance we have to be to place a game object. So on our robot, we have 4 rock pies. This is really similar to a Raspberry Pi, like the exact same idea. Each of them have 1 camera, and they're all set up around the robot, so we have a 360-degree view of our field. Each runs its own vision process, and it will share all that code back to the RoboRio, and it's all coded in C++. So our standard field will have 8 AprilTag markers, and we're just trying to find the actual location of each marker on the field so that can give us our location. Because there aren't AprilTag markers in the middle of the field, we can't create a full loop around it. So instead, we take calibration, we take the mapping of one side of the field and another side of the field and combine them so we have a full idea of what the entire field looks like. And we all do that relative to a fixed target, which is the lowest target ID. So just like ID 1, for example. So we use what we call a box of pies to do it. We collect images on it, have overlapping views with each camera. And we basically are solving an optimization problem to find the locations of our AprilTags that fit our measurements. So the box of pies basically just mimics the same process we have on our robot. It has 4 rock pies, 4 cameras, a network switch, a RoboRio, and a battery. And we only use 2 cameras at a time for field calibration. This lets us collect sequences of images to process like for AprilTag locations, and we all log it to thumb drives just connected to each rock pie. And we use tools in our repository to play back all this data and analyze it to give us actual like field location values that we can use to localize.
Grab that. Yeah, thanks. So I'm going to jump into the localization process. What we do here is use a sequence of images from 2 pies. So you can see, kind of call it a left pie and a right pie, taking images of the tags that are on the field. And we'll expose the 2 pies to various tags, trying to get both images where 2 tags are seen in the same image by 1 pie, and images where each pie sees a different tag. So that we're trying to build kind of a map of where all the tags are visually. And I'll go through all the process and details on that. I should mention this is work done by a senior from last year, Milind Upadhyay, who kind of wrote up all the code. He's graduated, he's at University of Wisconsin now, so he's not here to present, but just want to give him credit for all the work he did. So I'll play this one more time just so to make sure people can see kind of the things I want to emphasize. You can see as we're detecting the targets, we're drawing this artificial coordinate system on them, this red, green, and blue little origin for each of the targets. So we're localizing precisely where those are in 3 dimensions, and then being able to reproject that into the image. And again, as I mentioned earlier, each tag is identified by its own ID, and we're trying to get multiple views of each tag as we move around. So this box of pies, we're literally just carrying kind of in front of the AprilTags and collecting the images, and then we process them offline. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time on talking about the notation we use. We're doing transformations between different coordinate systems, and so it can get a little complicated. I'm going to try and simplify it as much so that we can track through all that's happening in this optimization. When you're doing mapping with 3D coordinates, it's very easy to get confused and get your head in the wrong space because sometimes it's hard to visualize things, but trying to be just very careful of what each coordinate system is related to the other is very useful. So when I talk about transforms, what I'm talking about is a mapping from one coordinate frame to another. So going from, say, this first XYZ frame, transforming both in position in 3-dimensional space and orientation in 3-dimensional space to another coordinate frame. And so sometimes I'll refer to that as T as the translation and R as the rotation. But usually we represent it as a single homogeneous transform H that combines both the rotation and the transformation. And when I want to combine these together, I can multiply them together as matrices to go from one coordinate frame to the next and string them all together. So what I'll refer to as always this H is kind of this matrix that's actually a four-dimensional matrix that represents both the rotation and translation altogether. This is very standard in kind of the robotics literature. Okay, so that's kind of the basis, is that H represents the moving from one coordinate frame to the next. Okay, and so generally, if I want to think about now moving between the world space, where is kind of our reference frame for where the origin of the field is, let's say, to a camera, to one of the April tags, I can map these all together using these transformations. And so I'll use this notation. So one more kind of additional twist on the transformation is use a subscript to note where I'm mapping from and the superscript to map where I'm to. So this H world tag means that I'm mapping from the world coordinate frame, say the origin of the field, to the April tag that I'm trying to detect. So that would be this map right here, going from world over to the tag. So it's the transformation that would take the world. So this is where the tags are located in space. So if I start the match, I need to know where every one of my tags is. So each tag would have one of these maps that says that tag is 7 meters down the field, 2 meters to the left, a meter up, and it's rotated by 90 degrees around the z-axis, for example. So that would be, each one of those is going to have its own representation. And then if I want to start stringing these together, that world to tag map, I could also represent by going through the camera. So if I know where the camera is in the world relative to that origin, and I know where the tag is relative to the camera, I can string those two together. And so what I'll see is that the map from world to tag is the same as going from the camera to the world to the camera, camera to the tag. And those are going to be the same maps. And I get those by just multiplying them together. Okay, so this is a way to just kind of track through all the different transformations that are involved. One of the things to note is when I'm doing this, the superscript that I'm multiplying from times the subscript that I'm multiplying by, I have to match. So that's how I get these things in sequence. So if I want to go from camera to world and world to camera, camera to tag, it's world to camera, and the superscript matches the subscript of the tag, and then those kind of disappear, and I'm left with the world to tag. Okay, so that's one important piece. And then the second important piece is if I want to go backwards, it's just the inverse of the matrix. So I invert the matrix to go the opposite way. So in other words, if I had a measurement of the tag to camera, if I wanted to get that, that's just the same as camera to tag inverted. It's the opposite relationship. So if I have a measurement of where the tag is with respect to my camera, if I want the opposite, I just invert that matrix and I get the opposite transformation. Okay, and so then I can string these all together and manipulate however I want. So if I wanted to know where the camera was in the world space, so this location, I get that in a couple different ways, but one of them is knowing where the tag is in the world space and then undoing it by this opposite transformation here, which is just kind of this formula that includes the inverse. And you see when I flip this, then the tag comes in, becomes a subscript, and it matches with the tag in the superscript, and I can multiply them all together. So it allows me to track through these very well. That's just a little bit because I'm going to put a bunch of formulas here that hopefully everybody can kind of get a sense of and follow with that nomenclature. Okay, so then when we think about mapping the targets out in space, our approach uses these three things. One is the map between two cameras. So I need to go, if I've got these two cameras that are looking at the world, I need to know what one camera looks like from the other, or how they're related to the other. That's what we call extrinsic calibration, and I'm going to talk about that later. But it might go from camera I to camera J, camera 1 to camera 2, for example. The second thing we have is a map that is what we observe. Where is the tag relative to the camera? So when I'm looking in the camera and I see a tag, what I can infer from that is where the pose is, where that tag is relative to the camera. And we're just using standard AprilTag libraries to do that. So that's given to us by third-party libraries. So the map that says I'm looking at camera 1 and I see tag 3, that would just be HCam1 tag 3. And then lastly, the relationship between two tags. So tag K to tag J, or tag K to tag L. That's kind of what we're solving for effectively, is where are all the tags relative to each other, and then we'll use kind of a notion of where one tag is relative to the world, and we'll string it all together to form this big map. of where all the tags are in the world. Okay, so that's all the notation, and now we'll jump into actually solving this. So the two tags look like this, the camera views. I can see tag 2 here and tag 3 here in two different camera views. Okay, so how am I going to solve this problem? So there's really 3 steps to it. One is I measure where all the tags are. So in camera 2, I can see tag 1 and tag 2. In camera 1, I can see tag 3. Okay, so those are all my measurements. The thing that we assume we have for solving this process is what we call the extrinsic. It's where is camera 2 with respect to camera 1. So that's cam 1, cam 2. And then to figure out where the tags are relative to each other, and tells us where the tags are on the field, then I just kind of pair these things, string these all together. So if I want to know the relationship between tag 2 and tag 3, I can figure that out by knowing this measurement, this is our extrinsic, and this measurement, and chain them all together to figure out where the tags are relative to each other. So that's how I get the tag 1 to tag 2, the red thing that I'm trying to estimate, and tag 2 to tag 3 is the other red thing that I'm trying to estimate. Okay. How do people feel about that? Making sense? Yeah.
How do you figure out where the tags are in, like, relative to the world?
Great question. Perfect question.
Through the perspective of the camera, how do you figure out?
So we don't figure it out with relative to the world. What we do is we assume that one of the tags in the world is known. So it's kind of like we have to fix one of those, because you're absolutely right. All we know is relative to each between the different tags. So we have to fix them in space somewhere. You know, if I only know where they are relative to each other, I've got to figure out where to plop it down. And what we do is we freeze one of them. Maxwell mentioned that earlier. We freeze one of the tags. We usually pick the lowest index tag as the frozen one, and then we map everything relative to that.
And how do you figure out, like, for tag number 2, how do you figure out where it is, like, in 3-dimensional space based off of the 2D image from the camera?
Yes, and you know, we didn't cover that here, partly because it's not something we wrote, but the AprilTag library has the ability to figure out the full 3D pose from a camera view. And it does that by knowing the size of the tag, and kind of what it does is it looks at how the image distorts as it sees a tag, and then figures out what what implies for a full 3D space from the camera. So yeah, the library kind of does that for us, but there's some cool math behind that also. Yeah, cool, great questions. Yeah.
So there's also the element of the timing over here, because the robot is not static, it's moving.
Yes.
And so
yes.
the pictures that you are taking and correlating, they need to be taken at the same.
They need to be in sync. Yes. So we fudge a little bit on that, and it's a good call out. We move slowly, so we're not moving fast, and we're taking pictures at a pretty high frame rate, so that we're kind of assuming that the cameras haven't moved too much between their successive frames. So we're pairing up neighboring frames with that. Ideally, they'd be exactly sync, so you take all the cameras at once. We don't have that, but they're close enough in sync that you're talking about a few milliseconds difference between the images, and you're not moving very fast. So yeah, there's a little bit of a miss there, and I think we kind of assume that because we're moving back and forth, we'll average out any effects there. But there's an assumption there. Yep. Yeah.
So how do you guys know, like, how fast to move? Like, because it needs to move slowly enough to actually be able to capture the AprilTag, but then it also needs to move fast enough to be able to win the competition and stuff.
So this is just for calibration. We move slowly, right? So when we're in competition, we're not trying to map the tag, so we don't care as much about that. Then we're just doing each camera is kind of independent of the other, and we can move as fast as we want. Now, there's other issues that you're right to worry about that, but for this, it doesn't matter because we can move as slow as we want.
Yeah, because it's all done in the box of pies. So.
Oh no.
So you can move it as slow as you want to.
Let's see. Okay.
There's a question here.
I'm sorry. Thank you. Yeah.
So you run calibration, like, before every match?
We generally are doing it for the field. So we won't do it at every match. We'll just, when we get to a new field, we'll do the calibration because that field shouldn't change over the course of the match.
It resets into some sort of file because you, like, turn off your rotor.
Yes. Yeah. We save it to a calibration, a mapping file. Yeah. Great questions. Yeah. Okay. Okay, thanks. So then the optimization problem is basically this. We're going to have a bunch of what we'll call constraints, which are, I've solved this problem based on a couple observations of what I think the difference between tag 1 and tag 2 is, and do that multiple times, and do that same between tag 2 and tag 3 and tag 4, kind of build up all the constraints between the tags. Often, so either what you'll see is you see 2 tags in one view, or you see 1 tag in 2 different camera views, but both of them can be made to give you the same observation. And what we're solving for actually, and I cheated a little in the notation earlier, but we're actually solving for world to tag. This goes back to your question. But remember that I can figure out the relationship between each tag just by multiplying and inverting one of those. So I'll show that in a second. But this is what we're trying to get at the end of the day is where is each tag in the world space? Okay, and then we're using series as a nice solver to solve an optimization problem there, solving for those tags. And what the cost function that we're going to use is if I'm measuring 2 tags, say tag 1 and tag 2, and I've got my kth observation, if you will, then it's the difference between my estimate, the thing that I observed between tag 1 and tag 2, and what I think the solution is. So the estimate is the one with the hat, the solution is the one with the bar on top. Okay? The estimate is the one I mentioned you get from just all your observations. The one with the bar I get just from taking the world view of each of the tags, inverting one of them, and the math just kind of works out there. If you track the subscripts and superscripts. So that's my cost. It's kind of how close is my estimate of where the things are to my observation of what I saw. And we do this by essentially taking a norm of this matrix. If everything were perfect and my estimates were exactly where everything was, this thing would be just the identity matrix, and the norm would be, well, the norm would be 0 is how we would phrase it. But and so the cost would be 0 is how we think about that. Okay, yeah. And then the solution, the optimization problem is take all my observations, take the cost from each one, the error from what I saw versus what I think it is, and then reduce the error by changing my estimates of where the tags are in the world. Okay, and so I solve for these world to tags. Okay, this is just a visualization to show what kind of the samples would look like as I'm moving around. The same video I played earlier. Here you can see these are estimates from camera 2 and camera 3. They should be on top of each other if our map was right. But camera 2 is seeing one of the tags, camera 3 is seeing another tag, and because the map's wrong, our estimates of where the robot are is wrong. So the little coordinate frames here, 6 and 7, are the, I'm going to unplay it again, just so we can go through it. Look, this is like pi 2 and pi 3 seeing tag 6. And then as they see 2 different tags, if the tags were right, then those estimates would be right on top of each other. But because our tags are in the wrong place, the robot thinks it's in 2 different places at once. It thinks it's in one place for tag 6 and one place for tag 7. Okay. And then the end game here is to solve for the best fit of the different tags. In this case, we were just mapping this side of the field. So we're kind of trying to figure out where to put tags 6, 7, and 8. 1, 2, and 3, we don't care about this because we're just doing one side of the field. And then we'll map the other side of the field at a separate data collection run. Okay.
Yeah. And so by doing all this, we're getting the actual position of our April tags to some world origin, some transformation from that world origin. I think actually.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Just a few notes on this. One is we're doing outlier rejection. So what that means is we've got all these observations. We get an estimate of where the tags are. We go back and look to see if some of those estimates were just really bad, and we get rid of them. And so it's a nice step to just make sure, because we have noisy measurements, that we don't take them absolutely. So when we sample first, we solve the problem. We go back and look at which of those measurements were way off. They didn't make any sense. We throw those out and then re-solve the problem. And it just helps us get a better estimate. We also scale the the cost function by two things. One is for observations of the tags that are further away, we have less confidence in those. So as the tags get further away, our estimate becomes more noisy, so we scale it by the inverse of the uncertainty. Yep.
It's the inverse of the square.
Does it say square? Yeah, sorry. Proportional to the inverse of the square of the distance. Thank you. Yep, wrote that down wrong. So that's right. It's the inverse of the uncertainty. And then we also normalize by the number of observations. Right? You don't want to have seen one of the targets 1,000 times and the other targets only 2 times and have the cost be unbalanced. So we weight by the number of observations. And then the last step goes back to kind of this notion that we only are looking at relative positions, but we need to align it with a world map. So we actually solve an optimization problem that tries to line up our final solution with the original map to try and, so that we don't shift our map a lot. So it could be that our solution wants to rotate the map significantly. We kind of bring it back into play. So it tries to realign the map. You want to talk about that one? Yeah, thanks.
Okay, so this on the right is the same video, but this has the proper target map after we've done all the field mapping. So you can see when pi 2 and pi 3, they see the different tags. They think they're at different positions. Now that we have the accurate field, it doesn't matter what tags they see, they're at the same position because we know the position of the actual April tags. So here it was confused because it thought the April tag should be at a different position than what it is. But here, because it knows where each of them are, the position is always the same. Okay. I think it was.
If you want, yeah.
Yeah, it's fine. So to actually do field mapping like this, we need 2 important types of calibration, intrinsics and extrinsic calibration. So our intrinsics, basically, we're just trying to, I think my understanding is getting rid of the distortions and like the distance of the camera to the lens and the warping you have in the image. Well, the extrinsics is trying to find the position of the cameras relative to some set position, which is either some frame on the robot or to another camera. So to solve for the extrinsic calibration, basically it's similar to target mapping, but because we're estimating the positions of 2 April tags relative to each other, but we're using that data to find where our cameras kind of are, the relative pose between 2 cameras, to each other or to some frame on the robot. And so here, we're getting the relative positions between these 2 April tags, and then that allows us to get the position between camera to camera from the position between the April tags. And so here's kind of a video of what's going on. This was at NASA when we did this. Here you can kind of see we're seeing 2 April tags in 2 different cameras. Then we're seeing 2 April tags in 1 camera. It's kind of like how we were doing with target mapping. And now we're using this to find our cameras. And we're only using 2 April tags. You can see someone's actually standing over the 3rd one. We don't really want that for this type of calibration. And so we're just basically spinning around so all the cameras have that same sort of relationship. So we can get the positions of them to each other. Do you want to actually?
I'll take this. Sure.
Yeah.
Yep. So I just want to again walk through the kind of the math behind this and how it's all laid out. Again, as Maxwell was saying, what we're trying to get here now is the extrinsic. So this is kind of the piece that you have to do before you do the target mapping. We want to do the extrinsics, which is just the map between camera 1 and camera 2. So to do that, we're going to use the measurements, the green ones, where the tags are relative to the camera. And we're going to use that to build up an estimate of where tag 1 and tag 2 are relative to each other. So this is the same kind of thing we would do in mapping, but in this case, we're just focused on 2 tags because that's all we really need. So we're just trying to figure out where the 2 tags are relative to each other. And we can do that just purely from estimates from seeing 2 tags in the same camera. So here's kind of the equations that go with it, but it's basically the relationship between tag 1 and tag 2, the red thing, is tag 1 to camera 2 and tag 2 to camera 2 because we're just seeing it from camera 2, and I get tag 1 to camera 2 by inverting the measurement that I had of camera 2 to tag 1. Does that seem all right to everyone? So I mean, we've got 2 measurements of the tags, and we're just using that to figure out what the measurement of the tags relative to each other are, because we've seen it in one view. So it's really easy that way. Then with that, we can figure out where the cameras are relative to each other by seeing one of the tags in each of the camera views. So we're just using the fact that we're going to see tag 1, say, in camera 2, and tag 2 in camera 1. Sorry, it's flipped from how you might like to see it, but that'll allow us to form that map between the two. So we get measurements of one tag in each view. We get an estimate of the pose between the two tags. That was the first step. And then the last step is to figure out the estimate of the camera to camera extrinsics. And we actually didn't set this up in an optimizer. We just take averages in this one. It's a little simpler setup. So first step, solve for the relationship between two tags, and then figure out the relationship between two cameras by seeing the tags in separate views. So it's in each camera's view. Just a side note, averaging rotations is always a little tricky. You have to be careful. Though for us right now, the rotations are pretty small, so you can actually just take the norm of a quaternion angle, and it gives you a pretty good result there. And then what does this look like?
Yes. So here you can see the same image from NASA, and this is kind of representation of us actually finding extrinsic calibration for our cameras here. So it's facing, you can kind of think of it as facing each of these AprilTags. You have your X and your Y, and your Z is pointing right at you. So you're just facing the AprilTag, and that's kind of the position you're looking at. It's flipped here, but it's the same thing. And so basically how we're seeing each AprilTag is giving us the position for our cameras. I think this goes on a little longer. Yeah. And this all extends to find extrinsics between all 4 cameras. We don't do target mapping and extrinsics at the same time, just because the box of pies is a lot easier to carry out to the field than a full robot, especially during calibration. And then we can also just calibrate multiple cameras on the robot by just rotating it in front of shaper tags. We haven't really talked about how we figure out the extrinsics into the cameras that much to the robot-based frame, but we're not really going to go over that too much. We give some highlights, I think. Yeah, and all our code is all public on GitHub. Feel free to check it out. Very interesting, I think, at least. We use OpenCV4 for a lot of the image processing. We use AprilTag to actually get the pose of each AprilTag. We use Eigen to do basically everything with 3D transformations, matrices. And we use a series solver for the optimization. And any questions?
Did that make sense? Does anybody understand what went on? Yeah.
Where do you learn all this linear algebra and maths?
College and the internet?
Yeah. Linear algebra for me was undergraduate. Had a linear algebra course when I went to college. Probably in engineering curriculum, it was like second or third year of college. Probably people are learning a little bit earlier now. I will say the first linear algebra class I took, I didn't understand at all. And thought it was cool, but just didn't get it. And then I had a linear algebra class in grad school that just opened my mind, and it was amazing to see. It's really just a fantastic, beautiful theory that's very deep, and the transformations that get used in robotics are just fantastic. So you can pick it up along the way. I think we're trying to expose a lot of the folks in high school now to that. I don't think they get any formal exposure.
I think
you do some matrices and vectors.
Yeah, matrices and vectors and physics. But
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. I'm sorry. Thank you. Yeah. Thanks for the reminder. The question was, how do you learn the linear algebra? And yeah, I'm sorry I wasn't repeating questions earlier. I totally forgot about that. And yeah, again, I think it's a great college level class, also great in grad school. Robotics fundamentally uses a lot of these transformations, these 3D transformations, especially for doing computer vision, for doing mapping, called SLAM, where you try and drive a robot or a car or anything like that through some space it's never seen before, and it's trying to figure out where everything is in the world and where it is localized in that map in the world. So the SLAM problem is this classical problem in robotics that uses all of these techniques around linear algebra, around mapping 3D spaces. Yes?
How do you then use
Okay, so the question, thank you, was how do you use this in competition? Do you want to talk about it?
Yeah. So because we know the location of each AprilTag, we know that when we see one, we can kind of figure out where we are on the field. And if we know where we are in the field, we can kind of orient ourselves properly, especially for game piece placement. This year, placing game pieces has been kind of a challenge to do manually. So knowing where we are in the field, knowing kind of our position on the field is very helpful to know. So we can then just do it, align ourselves onto to score automatically, because it will take a longer time if the drivers have to do it manually. That's like the main reason. And then localization is also just like useful, especially for autonomous mode. If we didn't have localization in autonomous mode, it would not go as far as it did last season.
And maybe before jumping to the next question, I'd also just, when we think about previous seasons and next seasons coming up, there are a lot of times when you have to like shoot at a target, for example. So knowing where you are on the field relative to that target is really important. In this case, the targets were much closer. We were placing elements, but it's still important to know kind of where you are, how you need to turn to automate that. So we have a button that you hit that automates the steering to be able to place a cone or place a cube for this past season. Sorry.
How accurate was your localization?
Yeah, we never got exact measurements. What we were seeing was within a few centimeters, probably within 5 centimeters was roughly what we expected. And heading was generally within a degree or two.
But the question was how accurate was our localization?
Jeez, I'm terrible at that. Thanks. Yep, so localization was, I'd say it was good. There's obviously challenges. The closer you are to a target, the better your accuracy is going to be. If you're seeing something from 5 meters away, if you're lucky to see the target, it's probably going to be a pretty weak estimate. And we, as you were asking earlier, we scale relative to that. So we normalize with the distances to make our estimates more uncertain when we fuse it with our position data. Yes?
During match play, are you doing for multiple targets on the robot, or how are you doing the pose filtering for that to get your after single robot pose from the multiple transitions from the AprilTags after you've done the calculation, the calibration?
So the question, if I'll just rephrase it, and you tell me if I get it right, is how are we fusing the multiple estimates in our localization estimate?
Yeah, well,
during match play. During match play, yeah. That's the next talk on localization, so that may be the best place to. I think he's going to talk about how he fuses all the information, but we essentially are running. It's effectively a Kalman filter, which is fusing our IMU data, our drivetrain data, with the images. So the images comes in, it gives you an estimate of where you are on the field. So it's giving you a position estimate, and we fuse that in. Basically, the way I tend to think of it is an estimate of where I am in the world gives me kind of a ball of uncertainty of where I think I am. And I have the robot in some place, and it's got some knowledge of where it is. And we kind of intersect those two, and the robot, our newest estimate, the revised estimate, is kind of in the intersection of those.
Yeah, I was more wondering, because you would logically see multiple flags in the field,
Yeah.
How are you fusing this to a single vision estimate before you fuse that with your drivetrain methodology?
We are not. So the way so the question was, how do you take multiple tag estimates and fuse them together before you feed it into the drivetrain estimate, I think, right? No, we're taking each estimate independently, and because each estimate is giving us an estimate of the robot position, because of the extrinsic calibration. So it takes a measurement of the tag, transforms it from the camera back to a single robot frame. And with that, we're just, every time we see a tag, it can even be 2 tags in the same view. Every time we get an estimate, we're fusing that data into the localization estimate. Did that get your question? Yeah, okay. Yes?
How were you able to test all that?
The question was, how are we able to test all that?
And know it's
Yeah, I'll try and answer that. Maybe you have a good answer.
I don't think I have a better answer.
So we have offline testing, so we log data and we can play it back. So we can see kind of making sure things are giving us the right information. We have a lot of visualization tools. You saw some of the visualization where it's showing where the robot thinks it is in the world. So a lot of that is done by, there's some basic unit tests that just say, hey, I got a tag measurement, is it placed in the right place? But those are pretty basic. But a lot of it is just observing where the robot thinks it is relative to a map of the field. Can you maybe bring up, do you have that map?
Yeah, which one?
Go back to the map of the field.
Oh, yeah.
We can just show that real quick.
Yeah.
So we have a map of the field, and we will draw the robot, both where the robot thinks it is and where the implied position of the robot by each of the tag observations is. And you can see in cases where we're doing well and like our map is good, everything's good, those estimates will line up on top of each other. In cases where either our extrinsics are bad or the map is bad, you'll see the estimates kind of float almost like ghost around. And so that's a little bit how we judge how we're doing. We've just been talking about doing this year a online estimator that will take that information. So you can imagine there are two things that can happen. One is I see, in one camera view, I see two targets, right? And this goes back maybe a little bit to your question. I see two targets. It gives me two estimates. I plot those, and we saw those. And so maybe I take those two estimates, and they put me in different locations. So that tells me that probably my map is bad because I've seen two targets by the same camera. That same camera better be in the same place, but the estimates are in different places. So what's wrong there? It's likely that the map is incorrect. So it tells us to go, hey, you need to go fix the map if that's happening consistently. The other thing you can do is see the same target with two different cameras, and if that doesn't have the same estimate of where the robot is, that probably means that your relationship between your two cameras is bad. And so you know your extrinsics are having trouble. So you can kind of split the problem into sections that way by observing on the field what's happening. That's probably a long-winded way to answer. I don't know if you've seen other things, but
I don't think I have.
yeah,
It seems like
yeah. And you know, if we're getting there and we're trying to place a piece and it's not going in the right place, it probably means our estimates are bad. And it's then we have to start breaking it down. Like, where is it? Is it the map is wrong? Is it our extrinsics are wrong? Did the camera get knocked? You know, for some way. That sort of thing. One watch.
So how are you guys actually using this robot pose estimate for auto scoring? Do you rely on other sensors to do so, or just the pose estimate? Like, do you have like a sensor in your end effector to figure out the gate? Like, I'm not exactly sure.
So the question was, how do we use this data to like score an auto? Okay. On our end effector, we have sensors like practically everywhere. On our end effector, we have both a beam break and a time of flight sensor, and those can kind of tell us if we have something in our end effector, kind of where it is, and that will help with automated scoring. And then we also have an IMU on our robot, which also helps us check the general rotation, kind of like position of our robot. Did you answer your question?
Yeah.
Cool.
I was wondering what choices you made to minimize the latency on the cameras.
What choices do we make to minimize the latency on the cameras was the question.
Yep, thank you. There hasn't been a lot. I mean, so we're using a rolling shutter, so you're going to have some latency and delay in the data you get out. It's also got rolling shutter artifacts. What we do, and primarily is to get the data through fast, is we're using flat buffers, so there's not a lot of copying of images, so it goes kind of right into memory. We're keeping that data structure intact. So it's mostly just about processing fast to get those. But they're all time-stamped, so when we're fusing the data in our localization, we'll use that timestamp and fuse it in at the right place. So we actually have a history that gets kept, and we play it back to take care of the offsets of the time. I don't know if there's something else you were wondering about there, or other challenges you've seen.
You're using a Raspberry Pi.
We're using a Rock Pi, but yeah, very similar. Yeah.
You know, I guess you're avoiding using a USB camera.
We are.
Using a fast interface.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, that's a great point. So just so I can repeat it. So yeah, we're using a Rock Pi. We are definitely avoiding USB interfaces, primarily because we've had challenges with the flaky connections trying to get USB to be solid, but also the speed that you get with MIPI transfer is faster. So yeah, there are advantages there. Yeah.
Any choices on the lenses?
Lenses, I'd say we have unhappy trade-offs there. The question was about choices on the lenses that we made. The lenses, so the trade-offs we're trying to make. We want a wide field of view, so we're looking at 90 plus degree field of view, so we want a fairly wide field of view, but with low distortion. So we'd like something that doesn't have terrible lens distortion. We correct for it though anyway, we do an intrinsic calibration. We are trying to get as much light as possible in so we can keep the shutter speed, the exposure time small, because we don't want a lot of blur from motion blur. So we're trying to have as large an aperture as possible, but also try and get depth of field. So kind of it seems like you're aware, but there's like these several trade-offs that you're trying to optimize and combine between. Then there's also the cost of the lens and size and weight of the lens. So we're using M12 lenses, which are these very small lenses. So we've ended up kind of in an okay spot, I think, that's got a 95, something like that, degree field of view. We're able to run at a fairly high or fairly low exposure time, and our depth of field is pretty solid. So trying to balance all those, though. Yeah. Yes.
Is there a particular reason why you went with the rolling shutter cameras as opposed to the global shutter?
The question is there a reason we went with rolling shutter instead of global shutter? Rolling shutters typically are fast. You can have better noise issues. Your noise is lower. Your dark noise is generally lower on rolling shutters. You generally get higher dynamic range on rolling shutters. So the kind of the specs on the camera are usually broader. They're often cheaper. But as you said, you have this rolling shutter artifacts. We're moving to a global shutter for this next year. So we are wanting to do that. I think we're still trying to balance, though, like, are we going to get the performance we need? The biggest challenge I'd say we have is because we're operating indoor, you don't have a ton of light. And so it's trying to make sure you have enough light coming into the camera so your exposure is long enough. Your sensitivity, it's not actually dynamic range here anymore, but your sensitivity is high enough to be able to pull in what you need there. So to answer your question, we're shifting towards a global shutter, but I think it's still a debate we're having is what the right approach there is. I'd love to talk to people about that more. It's an open question. I don't think we'll resolve it any particular year, but we're moving towards using a global shutter right now. Yeah. Yeah.
How do you figure out which libraries you should use?
Question was, how do you figure out which libraries to use? I don't know.
I don't think I'm going to have that much more insight.
Yeah. I mean, I think OpenCV has been a library that classically just gets you a lot of bang for the buck. You know, there's just so many things that are contained in that that we've used it. We use it. It does great for doing calibration, for estimation. They also have AprilTag detection in those libraries. We've moved to the April Robotics libraries. Actually, I saw Austin spend some time kind of looking at that and trying to figure out the performance of the AprilTag robotics in terms of speed of computation was better. So we've shifted towards the April Robotics libraries. Series Solver is just a nice open source solver that blends in well with things like Eigen in terms of it plays well with Eigen to do 3D solving and the transformations and handles those. Eigen's been a great library, again, for just 3D transformations. It does all of the mapping that we need for this sort of thing. But I think we're always just kind of evaluating what libraries are out there. There's been, and Austin and others have been working on how do you speed things up. That's always going to be an issue with processing images. And the halide libraries have been really good for kind of getting things to move faster in terms of assembly coding different parts of it. So you can sometimes optimize pieces of that. Yeah.
Have you guys started using other sensors like accelerometers to determine the position?
The question was, have we thought about using other sensors like accelerometers for our position? And we do. On the IMU, we have an accelerometer there, and it helps us with our position, because that is also have the battle of doing like actually our rotation and kind of like where we're going as well.
Yeah, it's got an accelerometer and a gyro on it. And we've got pretty good IMU data coming off of that gets fused in. And again, that's a talk in the next session about localization. Learn more about that. Yeah.
Is all your processing for like finding the robot pose done on the rock pies? And also, how are you sending it to the robot code? Are you using like network tables, or how is that done?
Do you want to? You can repeat the question, or
So the question was, is it? Stop me if I'm wrong, but is it that are we doing all of our like pose estimation processing on the rock pies, and how do we actually send that to the Aurelia?
Yeah.
I think it's all being done. I think all the like pose and issues all being done on the rock pies, as far as I understand.
Yep.
And we use flat buffers for our data on the rock pies, but I don't know if we're doing anything specifically special to send it through Rio, besides that they're just connected together through a switch.
We did.
Okay.
We built a pub subsystem so you can publish flat buffers and subscribe to them, and we taught it how to forward it across the network.
I see.
So we just set up forwarding for the pose across the network to Rio, and it subscribes and carries on.
I see.
We do most of it on the rock price. We'll send updates at 10 hertz or so over to the Rio, and the Rio has to fill in for 100 milliseconds or 50 milliseconds. I forget the exact rates, but and then it gets a new update from the big localization system, and that just we were running out of network bandwidth and processing time.
Anything else? Well, I appreciate the
All right,
attention.
thank you guys.
Thanks a lot.